DuckTalks is part of Res TV's network of podcasts. Check out res.tv for other great podcasts.
In the short time I've known you, you've wrecked my home and my money bin, unleashed several ancient evils, and almost got me killed twice.
4 times if you count each monster as an individual time.
That was incredible! When you pulled me into the airplane and said no time, and who would have thought of a Medusa gauntlet? Brilliant! Oh, and then you swung me out and pulled up just in time, and you kids are nothing but trouble! Curse me kilts, have I missed trouble? I suppose I'll have to keep an eye on you to teach you how to get into trouble properly.
You mean?
Beakley, clear my schedule! I'm taking the wee ones on a field trip.
It's the week of Monday, August 12th, and you're listening to episode 76 of DuckTalks. Hey, thanks for checking out our show. We're the DuckTales fan podcast, and we're here to cover all things DuckTales, including merchandise, news, cover some episodes. We may review an episode this week. It's going to be kind of odd because we didn't have a new episode of DuckTales. Anyway, my name's Mitch. I'm one of your hosts. Joining me tonight, my buddies, Pirate Steven and Josh.
Ahoy.
Hey, guys.
We have news about new episodes of DuckTales, so we're going to jump right into that right away and just hit this thing running. You guys have seen this news. We've been talking about it for a few days now because it kind of leaked through, I'm trying to remember, the latest information came to us through a Reddit where people got a hold of it through another one of those cable provider websites where they're just listing the episodes and stuff. And it seems that as of today, we're still going to say this is rumor until it's official. We'll say it's rumor. But from what I'm seeing, it's starting to show up in a manner that looks like the Disney Channel highlights. And we've talked about the Disney Channel highlights on the podcast before, but for anyone who maybe hasn't listened to the podcast, the Disney Channel highlights come out each month around the 20th, and they feature all of the new episodes for all of the shows on the Disney Channel. And so it gives a premiere date and time and the title for those episodes. And some people online, we don't know how they do it because we're not in that group. Some people online tend to get these a little early, and you'll start to see tweets and blogs start to show up, and it's only confirming what we've already been talking about. So we're going to jump into these. First of all, how excited were you guys to see this information?
It's always great to hear something new out there. And these episode titles that we get are just classic, and I can only imagine how awesome they're going to be. It's going to be a great 2 weeks of shows.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be almost back-to-back episodes again, like they did at the beginning of this. Is it the beginning of the season when they did that?
Oh, they did it recently. It was the last episodes we had. We had like 9 episodes within 2 weeks.
Yeah, so they're doing that whole block of Disney afternoon again for the rest of this season.
Yeah, I guess those episodes of the podcast will be called The Return of the New Disney Afternoon, because that's what we called those episodes. I thought it was cool previously when Frank, after the news broke on the last set, I think everyone online, as far as I've seen, are calling them episode bombs. As far as the last episode bomb, which was the New Disney Afternoon, Frank was tweeting about how cool it was to be able to see kids enjoy the show like he enjoyed the show, like we enjoyed the show, which was when you got home from school, around 3 p.m. Might be cutting it a little close, honestly. I think it was maybe 3:30, maybe 4 o'clock. I don't know. It was pretty close. I wasn't paying attention to the time when I was 5 years old. Anyway, I just knew I had to get home to watch it. But Frank was kind of celebrating the fact that kids were going to get to enjoy that. And although for us as adults it's not cool because we're not home to watch it, but it's really cool for the kids that they are able to experience that. And I thought it was cool that he was celebrating that.
Just we've gotten in this mindset now where we get weekly episodes for all of our normal TV shows. So it's just, I think, kind of a shock to us because as adults we're used to that format, and they're not trying to cater to the adults. They're trying to cater to the kids who are the ones who are supposed to be watching it.
Yeah, I'm going to watch it as soon as it's available on Disney now.
Which with the previous...
And then I'll watch it with my kids later.
With the previous episode bomb, they were coming out very early, in the morning. I don't know exactly what time, but when we got up those 2 weeks, the episodes were already there to watch.
Is it around midnight Pacific Standard Time, right?
I would think so. I've just never stayed up that late to see one start.
Yeah, it's around. I believe they get posted around 5 or 6 a.m. Eastern time. At least that's what time I wake up and see them.
Yeah, the girls. It was the easiest 2 weeks for them, and it wasn't quite 2 weeks, but all those new episodes. They got up early and got on the couch with their cereal and chocolate milk, and were ready to go while I worked on other things. They had their pre-breakfast with the cereal. And then I kept coming out of the kitchen and say, what's going on? What's going on? Of course, I didn't get to watch it till I got back home that evening. But yeah, we've got more of that to enjoy. And of course, for a podcast that's covering the show, it makes it very difficult to try and cover everything. And we've been discussing this because we've been anticipating another episode bomb. Honestly, very early on, we started to get the sense that these episodes were all going to come out at one time. We realized we were most likely going to get season 3 this year. And then when Pirate took notice that we were probably going to get a Christmas episode, it just all kind of clicked that we're going to have to do another 2-week marathon of episodes that we're going to have to try to cover. And we started thinking, how are we going to do that? We're still discussing it, but as much as we'd like to draw it out, I don't think we're going to have that much time before we get to season 3. I think we're going to have to cover these pretty quick.
Well, hopefully we'll hear by that time when season 3 will happen, and then we can kind of gauge it based upon that. Because I would hate to. I know we find things to talk about every week, but I would hate to rush through them because there's just so much good material every time we get a new episode.
Yeah, I loved having all of our friends on as guests when we did those episodes, and that was a lot of fun. But the weeks following, I was like, man, we could still be covering these episodes had we not just covered them all at one time. So maybe we could have paced it a little bit different had we known, because we didn't know going in, at least, that it was going to happen that way. But yeah, we'll cover them. We'll talk about them, and there's still things about some of those episodes that we want to cover. Guests that we've been talking with to have on to talk about different things. We still need to dedicate an entire episode to the Duck Knight Returns because that thing's just a masterpiece, and I think I could talk about it forever. And there's definitely some friends that we have that I want to record a conversation with them about it, so we'll be working on that. I'm sure we're going to have a little bit of a break after Christmas. I would anticipate we're going to get another October bomb, and then another break, and then that Christmas episode, and then another break, and we'll see how it goes. But we've strung everyone along for like 10 minutes, and we promised we were going to jump into these episode titles, and they're like, what are you guys doing? Not really. They love it. Everybody loves it. Thank you all for all the great feedback recently. And for anyone who sent us an email that I haven't answered between this recording and me putting it out, I'm sorry. We've read it. We love it. We're going to answer you. We had some long emails, which is really cool. But at the same time, sometimes it becomes difficult to answer those. And let's jump on these titles. The first title, and this one was probably one of the bigger surprises. There's a bunch of big surprises, but I felt like this was a big surprise. The show is going to return on September 3rd, And we said earlier, we believe these episodes are going to begin at 3 p.m. So this is September 3rd. That's a Monday. Whatever happened to Donald Duck?
It's a great title because we've seen what happened to Della Duck, the previous one, and it seems like we're going to get a whole Moon episode with Donald.
That episode we had with Della, when with that title, that whole episode was when she was trying to build the ship again and to get back to Earth, correct?
Yeah, it was all her. Until the Moonlanders showed up.
Yeah, so that makes me think then that this episode will be just all Donald-centric, just like that episode, and away from it, kind of its own little story going on.
Which is great because they still have a lot of story to develop there, where the Moon people are Moonlanders, right? That's what we're calling them.
Yeah.
They're getting ready for this invasion, so it's gonna be great to see how Donald fits in there as a new prisoner. I know a lot of people have been feeling bad about for Donald and missing him. And Frank said he's not coming back ever again because they did not win that Nickelodeon Kids Choice Award for Mexico.
I like when Frank's a troll.
Yeah, he's so good at it. But yeah, it'll be great to see Donald again.
I am kind of thinking that this episode may deal with because Frank kind of mentioned that one of the episodes is going to deal with why Donald's so angry. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of thinking that since it's going to be so Donald-centric that it's going to maybe have flashbacks of those during this episode.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's very likely going to be the episode that has that. I think the placement of this episode has me very curious on some of the behind-the-scenes stuff, because when we previously, and we blogged about it in the past week, when we previously found out about Happy Birthday Doofus Drake and Nightmare and Kill Motor Heel, and I think we talked about those in last week's podcast. I know we did. But when we came across that, we talked about the numbering of those episodes, and they are sequential with the previous episodes, I believe. So I'm wondering if in production this episode was supposed to air here or if it's supposed to air later. And I'm just wondering how much of that might be because of all the internet requests for more Donald, or if they even consider that at all. It just has me curious, just based off those production numbers. But I can't wait to get more Donald Duck, and I know there's been some people that have feel like he's been cut short and there hasn't been enough Donald Duck. I think that's going to change again here at the end. We're going to get a lot of Donald.
Yeah, and also we get to see Penumbra she's developing, becoming Della's best friend. I mean, that's how it's going to end, right? We already knew that from the beginning. And we get to see maybe she becomes friends with Donald or something as they get ready, as she develops a heart and gets ready for this invasion herself.
Yeah, she looked concerned in that teaser where we saw Lunaris presenting Donald to the Moonlanders, and you can see her in the background. She knows that what he's saying isn't true. So we're going to get more Moonlanders. We're going to get more Donald. We're going to find out what's going on with that story. And then the following day, the next day on Tuesday, Happy Birthday Doofus Drake. We already talked about this episode last week. We've seen it in that teaser. We know that it's going to have Boyd. People are, or as we originally were calling him, Astro Beaks. And also Goldie with teaming up with Louie. So I think this is the only episode to this point that we have a description for.
Is this description been like a verified one, or is it just one that somebody came up with based on?
Yeah, it showed up on Google.
What we've seen. Oh, okay.
The description on Google.com says Louie teams with. That seems weird. Louie teams with Goldie to scam their way through Doofus's dangerous party. Huey pushes himself out of his comfort zone in his favorite online game. And, of course, we were talking about how it looks like the B story will be the story where we see Huey in all the 2D kind of video game looking background. And also in the most recent teaser, we saw Della in kind of a mech suit that looked like it might be kind of 2D. So I'm guessing she's going to be involved in that video game. or online game, as they call it. As all the kids call it, the online game. We also found about a Nightmare on Kill Motor Hill. That's going to be September 5th. And if I'm keeping up with these dates, that's going to put us on Wednesday. We talked about this. We don't have a description that I have seen for this episode, but we were Kill Motor Hill. That's a big deal when it comes to the comics. I don't know that the original DuckTales brought it up all that often, but that's the location where the money bin was. Now, the money bin in the current DuckTales isn't, but we've recently found out with, it was the Disney Channel's, what was it? It was Louie's favorite treasures? Louie's favorite treasures? It was a video like that, and at the end of it, he says that you can mail stuff to him and it gives an address that includes Kill Motor Hill, the McDuck Mansion. So the mansion is on Kill Motor Hill. Nightmare, it's that dream episode we've been seeing for a very long time. We've been seeing clips from it. Everyone's excited about that episode. The return of Magica, who is still green. Can't wait to find out why. Great decision. Looks much better than the white duck.
Because maybe it's not really her. Sorry.
Explain.
I don't know, because if it's a dream or a nightmare caused by Lena, maybe that's just how she perceives her to look.
Oh, you're right.
I don't know. Just a theory.
Well, I mean, she's green, and last time we saw her, she was white. So you're right. Maybe this is because we also saw in the teaser there is a clip where Lena's like washing her face, and when she pulls her hands down, her image changes to something that's kind of reminiscent of Magica in the eyes. So yeah, it could be that. Man.
I'm right. Sorry. Just a theory.
Just a theory. It's a good one, though. On September 6th, Thursday, The Golden Armory of Cornelius Coote. Now, this is also an episode title that we've been talking about. We came across these. Someone shared this with us from GoWatchIt.com. And, Cornelius Coote is the founder of Duckburg. So this should be an amazing episode for Duck fans who like the comics. And for people who really like the comics, they're going to hate it. Because no matter what they do, it's not going to line up with the comics. We know that. So I hope, I really, really love the comics. And I really love DuckTales, both old and new. But you've got to kind of let go of, they're not going to do exactly what was in the comic. But I love the Easter eggs and the call-outs to the other media.
Exactly, because because these characters weren't represented in the original DuckTales, so the people who are the fans of the original show have no idea of these characters, just the fans of the comic. So at least they're getting some type of representation.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't want them to just retell stories because, if they were to just try to retell a story from the comic, it's not going to be as good as the comic, or maybe it would be as good as the comic, but it's not going, who wants a rehash? Let's do something new, let's do something different, let's do a fun spin on it that's reminiscent, or maybe even plays homage to it. But it doesn't need to be exactly the same. So I'm looking forward to this episode. And then everybody, and when I say everybody, I mean everybody is excited about September 9th when we get Typhoon, and we all get to bask in the glory of Bubba the Cave Duck.
Wait, did you say all of us are excited, or Casey's excited?
Well, Casey's definitely excited. Casey's been in the Discord, and I saw it today. I've actually got to jump in there. But he's over on our over at Res TV's Discord. There's a sub channel for DuckTalks, and he's very excited about this title because we've seen the clips and we know Bubba's coming, and it only makes sense that if there's an episode about a time machine, of course they're going to bring a cave duck back to the mansion. And a little Triceratops named Tootsie. who maybe isn't so little. Have we seen her next to other characters?
We've seen her that she looks. Or we've seen the poster where she is like about the size. I would say the normal size she was in the original show.
And Bubba's on a skateboard in that poster. I mean, I'm telling you, I think they're going to succeed at making Bubba an interesting character.
Yeah, he's playing a key guitar.
So that's Monday. Tuesday, September 10th. Glomtales.
Glomtales. Then y'all say woohoo.
Oh, woohoo.
Oh, we didn't do it together. Let's do it again.
I think it's better since it's off. Go ahead.
No, I already did it. We're past it now.
I think the part about this title that caught me, like, and I'm sure you guys did the same thing. My first reaction was, oh, okay, that clip from San Diego Comic-Con makes a lot more sense. It's more than just a takeover. It's a whole episode.
Yeah, and it leads into what we'll talk about what the next episode is, but it seems
Glomtales could be anything, and I'm very excited for that episode.
They better have that Glomtales intro for that episode.
Yeah, it'd be another one where they just kind of start off into the episode, and then at whatever point that tables get turned around, then it would start with the Glomtales. You think we'll have what was Dewey's name with the guitar? Daft. What they DJ Daft Duck?
Oh, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, maybe he'll be in the episode too. I wonder if that'll be a Tanner episode, because didn't Tanner work on that clip?
He did.
Yeah.
He did a lot of it.
That'd be cool. So, and like you said, that leads into the following episode, which is going to be on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, which is going to be on Wednesday, September the 11th, and that's the richest duck in the world.
So this seems like we're gonna finally figure out the bet between Scrooge and Glomgold on who's the richest duck in the world.
Wait, was that this season?
Yes. Yeah, and it's setting up to be where Glomgold's going to beat Scrooge in this again. It's kind of like the last crash of the Sun Chaser episode, where you're building up to the dramatic finale episode. So it's going to be. I feel like it's going to have that kind of drama in it as well.
So you think Glomtales is going to lead into Richest Duck, and then in Richest Duck, you think Glomgold's going to win?
Yeah, I feel like he's going to win the bet, and then it all comes down to that finale episode where, you know, maybe Glomgold, like we were talking about last time, maybe Glomgold and Scrooge have to team up.
I got another theory.
Uh-oh. What you got?
Oh, I think Steve is right, and Glomgold is going to be the richest duck, and then Scrooge is going to be all down on his luck and no longer be rich. And then in the finale, they're going to come back together, defeat the Moonlanders, and Scrooge is going to get all their ships, which happens to be made out of gold, and he's going to become the richest duck in the world again.
That's true, because we've seen that scene with all those ships lined up, and they're all made of gold. See, I was sitting here trying to think through that, because I agree. Glomgold's going to win. Something's going to happen. Glomgold's going to win. But I was trying to figure out how Scrooge could lose in the richest duck in the world, but then end up at the end of the season with his fortune back, because he's got to have his fortune back.
Yeah.
But I couldn't reconcile that, so I was thinking, well, maybe he wins in the end, and then that leads into Moonlanders. But I think that's a pretty good idea, too. I think you guys are onto something. Well, that does lead us.
Theories.
That does lead into Thursday, September the 12th. The episode title is Moonvasion, and if there was a title this season that they would have liked to have kept secret, I would imagine it's that one. Not that we didn't know there wasn't a moon invasion coming. So what do you guys think? You think Moonvasion... Okay, so we've been talking about this all week. This episode, it's the season finale. It's going to air on Thursday the 12th. I am anticipating a 44-minute episode. Now, we've been told there was 25 episodes this season, and if this episode's a single 22-minute episode, then we're only going to get 24. But if it's a two-parter, whether it's broken up Thursday and Friday, and we've just not seen Friday listed yet, or whether it's a two-parter on Thursday and that's the end of it, either way, it's really got to be a double-sized episode. If I can math.
I think it's gonna be a double-sized episode. There's so much story built up to this point that it's gotta have 2 episodes to complete it.
And if the last we saw of Donald and the Moonlanders was on September 3rd, I mean, there's really not a lot of room unless we get just like a quick clip here or there in one of these episodes. There's not a lot of room to build off of that before Moonvasion. Mm-hmm. And then to say that they're going to fit that entire story into 22 minutes, I just don't see that happening. Plus, there's the fact that this episode's airing on a Thursday, which really makes me wonder, will they split this up? Will there be a Friday episode and it's the second part of this? Will we get one of those classic cliffhangers that we used to have to deal with all the time? Dun, dun, dun. To be continued. And one thing about this episode, I was going to mention this earlier and I wanted to hold off till we got to this last episode. In one of the clips, we hear Penumbra. Penumbra? That's right. In one of the clips we've seen, we have Penumbra in the background telling someone that the Moonlanders are coming. So she doesn't say the Moonlanders are going. She's not telling Donald they're going. She says the Moonlanders are coming. So she has to have come to Earth first to warn Donald's family, which I imagine she's probably talking to Della. So, I mean, we're going to have part of this episode, and maybe it's even the end. No, I don't see them getting ready for an invasion after on September 3rd. So that's got to take place in this episode, I would imagine. It's got to be a two-parter. You think they'll break it up between 2 days?
Possible.
One thing's for sure, we've got 8 or 9 episodes coming up, and it's all going to be within a 2-week span again, and we're going to have a lot of fun covering it. We'll be here talking about these episodes. We'd love to hear from you. Of course, we typically record on a Monday. We changed that last time in order to try and cover these. I don't know that we'll change it this time. We'll probably stick to our normal format and just cover it the week after, and try not to get into the Monday episode that has just aired. But, send us an email, ducktalkspod@gmail.com. Holler at us on Twitter, at DuckTalks. Of course, we're over on Tumblr and Instagram as well. Just search for DuckTalks Pod, or DuckTalks Podcast. And let us know what you're thinking about these episodes. What are your favorite parts? What are you enjoying? What's your speculation? We look forward to hearing from you. We have a couple of items in Duck merch that we were going to cover this week before we do something kind of fun. First things first, some disappointing news. We learned, was that this week or this was last week? Sorry. We learned last week in the final hours that DuckTales Remastered was being pulled from digital stores. Now, this was a release that Capcom sent out to let everyone know that the game was being removed. If you own the game already, or if you purchased it before it was pulled, you still have access to it. You can still download it, but you can't purchase it any longer. It went down like the next day. Didn't we find out on the 7th and it started going down on the 8th?
Yeah, we found out I think it was like about 2 days before.
Okay. It was the 6th.
And they were saying that you can still purchase it on Steam, Xbox 360, and PS3. And then there was also physical copies available as well. But if you wanted the digital copies, these will be the last times you'll be able to purchase them.
Yeah, I'm sure the game's been out of print for a while. I mean, the last release was Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, and then of course Steam over on PC. But it was last generation consoles. Of course, Xbox players, it's backwards. The Xbox One is backwards compatible on that game, I believe. So if you have that console, you could have still gotten a hold of it. We tried to make sure everybody knew about it, and tried to share everything that we were seeing, so that people had a chance to get a hold of it. I have a copy on my Apple TV, the Apple TV that we played Disney Infinity on. It was my second purchase on the Apple TV, was to get that game, and I absolutely love it. One, it's such a classic game. I mean, it's got to be one of the greatest NES. It's got to be one of the greatest NES titles ever, anyway. But then when they remastered it with cartoon-looking graphics, throw in the fact that you had some phenomenal voice acting with some of the classic voice actors, and then also some really great substitutes for some of the voice actors that were no longer around or weren't available. And then, man, the soundtrack, which I still listen to on Spotify.
I really wish that they had released those on the current generation consoles. When it came out, I had just bought a PS4, and so I was waiting for it to be available, and they just never released it. But I did purchase the Disney Afternoon game bundle on the PS4. Maybe that's why they didn't release it on there. But it is a shame that they're taking these off. And yeah, if you don't have them now, it's too late. You'll have to buy the physical copies, which are the prices have gone up on the physical copies because of the removal of digital.
Yeah, people went to flip that one pretty fast. I have eBay alerts and other alerts that tells me when DuckTales stuff appears online, and it's been a flooded market of DuckTales remastered physical copies. They were pretty cheap and available before the digital got taken away, and now they're like $40.
Did I see you were up late downloading this game for an old PS3?
Well, I had bought it quite some time when I had a PS3 sale, and my PS3 wasn't set up. I've been PS4 for a while now, so I had to go and make sure I downloaded it from the PS3 store. So yeah, I was playing it the other night. It was fun.
Yeah, it's still the whole idea of digital games. We've talked about. I don't think we've talked about it on the podcast because we've not had a reason to, but we've talked about it. I'm still kind of on the fence on digital games. I mean, if you own this game, if you've purchased it, they've said you will still be able to download it in the future from that outlet. So, but man, that just kind of worries me that it wouldn't be there one day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the Xbox version is playable on the current generation Xbox One, even though it was for an older generation of Xbox games. So I was always hoping that would happen for the PlayStation One as well.
Well, cross our fingers if PS5.
Yeah. Well, I've heard rumors that it'll be backwards compatible with stuff. So
I've heard it with PS4, but I don't know about PS3 stuff.
Yeah. Well, hopefully. Other items in Duck merch. This was one that we actually reported on a year ago, and then we had to let everyone know that it wasn't coming. But now it's available for this season. There is Disguise Inc. has made a Launchpad McQuack costume for kids.
Yeah, it's awesome. So our friends at Disguise Inc. sent me one to peruse and showcase for everybody on the blog. And it is a kid's costume. It comes in sizes of extra small, small, and medium. It's not even like big kid sizes. 7 to 8 is the largest size it comes in. Luckily, my kid is 8 years old, and it fits him perfectly. But the cool part is, I mean, this is our first DuckTales 2017 merchandise that we've gotten in a while. Mm. And the mask, the Launchpad mask that comes with this, is a one size fits most. So adults who want to be Launchpad, I was Launchpad for Halloween last year. I didn't have a mask. I went all natural with a wig and my usual costume. Like I dress up as Launchpad all the time.
We all know the truth.
Right? So yeah, this mask fits adults, fits me fine, and it's a cool, even collectible. I mean, the previous ones they had last year, previous costumes were Scrooge McDuck and Gizmo Duck. So all three of these are pretty much adult masks that you could just pair up with. People are very creative with cosplay and Halloween costumes, and you can pair this up with an outfit that will make it a perfect pairing for a convention or Halloween.
Yeah, and before we started,
adults, this is the adults' option for this. Hopefully, in the future, maybe next year, maybe they'll have other options for adults and not just the mask. But this is what we have right now, so at least there's an option for us with the one size fits most.
And I did check before we started recording, and the first place that I saw the costume available was Target, and when I put it in my shopping cart, it said that it could be delivered on the 16th. So these are readily available, at least in my area. But if you're in the U.S., you should be able to get a hold of these, I think. Now for something we haven't been able to do in a while. We're going to review an episode.
But how can we review an episode with no new episodes?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Josh. Today is Monday, August the 12th, and today happens to be a special day for DuckTales 2017. It was on this date 2 years ago that the series premiere of DuckTales, titled Woo, first aired on was it Disney Channel or Disney XD? I think it was Disney Channel for the premiere.
No, it was XD and then moved to Disney Channel.
See, it's been 2 years ago. I don't remember anymore. But yeah, 2 years have gone by. And of course, in October, we will be celebrating 2 years of our podcast because that's when we decided we had to start talking about this. But man, 2 years have gone by. We thought, how could we celebrate? We just happened to be recording tonight anyway because we typically record on Mondays. And we said, you know what? We never reviewed the premiere of the series because we started once the regular episodes started airing. I can't remember. I'll have to go back and look what episode we first reviewed, but it's one of those early ones. Let's go back. Let's talk about Woo. So for this, we're going to talk about the 30-minute first half of the premiere, because the premiere aired as a 40. Well, I said 30 minutes, actually 22. The series premiere was a 44-minute movie, but it was 2 episodes put together that sometimes air together and sometimes they separate them so that they can fit it on the schedule. So we're just going to look at the first half, and that's really the introduction to the show and to all of the main characters. Typically, when we do a review, fellas, we start off with our 30-second episode recap. Now, I don't know when was the last time you watched Woo, but I may have watched it today. But I'm about to hit the generator to see which one of us is giving a recap. Are you ready?
Okay, what numbers are we so we know?
Well, that's the next part. I wanted to make sure you were ready first.
I'm ready.
I
thought you were going to be
2.
like...
Who had 2?
That's what I thought you were going to do.
All right, Josh, what number you got?
I'll take 3.
And Pirate?
I'll take 1.
And it's 3.
You kidding me?
Not at all. Oh, wait, I don't have a timer up. Hold on.
Oh, no. Okay.
Oh, you've got Woo. Come on. How many times have you think you've seen this episode?
Well, actually, I watched it a few times the last few weeks. So I've watched it probably 3 or 4 times the last few weeks.
Hey, I'll give you a pro tip on this. It's easier if you've got a timer in front of you.
Okay. I should have wrote it as a quick description while we were talking, and I didn't.
I brought it up earlier. That was my hint.
Ready, set, go. Huey, Dewey, and Louie need a babysitter. Donald takes them to Scrooge. Scrooge doesn't really want them around. Huey, Dewey, and Louie meet Webby. They get into the garage and find these really cool artifacts. And then Scrooge finds out that they've been messing around in the garage. A big dragon comes out. The dragon wants to eat all the gold, goes straight for the money bin. And they stop the dragon in its place and turn it back to stone. Scrooge likes them now, and they're all a big family.
Pretty good. 31 seconds. I like the ending. Scrooge likes them now. But I remember when this episode aired, we were so excited. We were talking about it, and I mean, it far exceeded my expectations on what we were going to get. I mean, just with the art and everything we'd seen, I was super excited about it. My girls and I had been watching DuckTales for a long time at that point, or it felt like a long time, on DVD. We had the first three. We were watching them. And so they were excited. Obviously, we're huge Darkwing Duck fans, so they knew Launchpad more so from. They still were like, hey, it's the guy from Darkwing. But just seeing him and everything, it was all exciting. But when this episode aired, man, it's so wonderfully done. That opening scene, just with the seagull flying around and ends up landing on the boat before Donald has a temper tantrum. It's just all great.
Yeah, it blew my expectations out of the water because I mean, I was a little bit apprehensive on the first episode just because I didn't know what it's going to be like. It was something that was a beloved TV show growing up, and I just didn't want them to ruin it. And I felt like they did an amazing job, and that they brought all the characters more to life and gave them way more depth. In terms of like Huey, Dewey, and Louie, Webby had more depth. It just had a rich history that they of the comics and the original show was brought into this, and it just, like I said, blew me out of the water.
One of the first things that beyond how cinematic it begins, because I think it's really very cinematic in how it begins, but once you're in the boat. And you hear the first person that speaks other than Donald's temper tantrum is Louie, first one to use words. And you see that they've got Donald's classic outfit, the bright blue, the red bow tie, and it's being shoved into, was it a trash compactor or was it the dishwasher? Either way, it catches fire and slaps Donald in the face. I've never understood what that was about. But all this is happening and carrying on, and it's really a great introduction to the family dynamic. You see how chaotic everything must be. Of course, you get that amazing Tony Anselmo, Donald Duck communicating with these boys. And I know a lot of people, even today, make comments about how difficult he is to understand. But when I watched it today, I was like, he's not that hard to understand, or at least he's not to me. He's never felt that difficult to me. I really love that they went with that voice and kept that true to the cartoon character, even though I would imagine people reading the comics, which we knew we had a hint, and now we know with some confirmation that they're relying very heavily on the Barks history, but we've got a character that maybe people would have maybe suspected his voice wouldn't be that difficult to understand. But I thought it was great. Just the kind of the melding of the two. And what was with whatever Huey was cooking with that fish? That was just gross. Of course, we get our first Disney Afternoon name drop here with Cape Suzette. And they're talking about the boys are going to try to sneak off, and they're trying to ditch Donald to go have an adventure, and which is exciting because we know DuckTales is about adventuring.
Mm-hmm. And throughout the episodes, we get a few name drops like that. They bring up Spoonerville, which is the town where Goofy and Max live, and then we also get name drop of Saint Gennard, which is where Darkwing Duck does his
crime fighting.
Crime fighting. That's the word I was looking for. So they have a lot of little hidden gems in there if you really pay attention.
Speaking of Spoonerville and Max Goof, Frank was actually asked on Tumblr, if I can say it, Tumblr recently, about Max, and I thought we would use this as our Frankly Speaking. Someone says, important question, where is Max Goof? And Frank's response was, Spoonerville, next question. So it gives me hope to know that Max exists in this universe. I mean, we weren't sure before, right? We'd just seen Goofy wearing the Goof Troop type clothing, but I think this is enough to say that whether we see him this season or not, this is a Goofy who has a son named Max. That's all I'm saying. But yeah, it's nice that we got those name drops early on in the show, and it really, I mean, it had us from the very beginning thinking that we were going to get something to bridge all these together, not knowing that by this time, 2 years later, we'd be looking at a season 3 poster going Disney after Nooniverse. But yeah, so the characters, the boys are going to take off. Donald finds out about their plan in one of my favorite scenes. Louis is like, who's Dewey? They find out that that Scrooge McDuck owes Donald, and that they're going to get to go spend time with Scrooge McDuck, and they freak out. And that's when we learn about the Scrooge McDuck in this world that DuckTales has built. And we get some really cool images that are like off paintings. And there's some of my favorite images from the show. They're really well done and based on Bark's paintings and looks. But we find out that Scrooge McDuck is a legend in their world. And I thought that was really cool. Not only is he the richest duck, but like, I mean, if you think about it nowadays, the people who are very wealthy that are adventurous, I mean, they're kind of legendary in our culture. So that's really cool that they did that.
Yeah, and they kind of made it seem that he had done all this stuff, all these cool adventures, and made obviously he made all his money already, but all the adventures and what kind of made him famous already in the past. And now he's kind of like taking a sidestep and just kind of, he's still running his businesses. He's not doing all his adventures, and he's kind of like just going through the motions.
Yeah, and then we end up in the scene in the money bin with him and the vultures. And they're just like, yeah, we're cutting funding to all this stuff. And he's like, whatever. Mm-hmm. And we just see him toss a few coins into a pretty empty money bin. And I think it's really cool looking back on this episode and seeing that, because I remember watching it and thinking, man, that doesn't look like a whole lot of cash. But, you know, they don't make a big deal out of it in that first image. You know, nobody's saying, wonder where all Scrooge's money went. But it's kind of, if you know the character and you're familiar with the money bin, it's something that kind of caught your eye, and it pays off later, much later.
You know, and I think in one of our past podcasts, one of the first few, we had talked about that we noticed that the money bin was noticeably lower than we would have thought it would have been.
Yeah,
it just seemed like a big drop from where they jump into the gold, and obviously we find out later why. It was just kind of interesting, these little details they have in the episode that they're leading up to in the story.
Yeah, and as I was watching it, I mean, you see Scrooge throw those coins in, and you hear them fall for a while and then hit, and then he goes over and starts pushing that door closed, and all the while he's just got this immensely unhappy look. And knowing now where that money went and what that money, the missing money, what the missing money represents, it's a I don't know. It's kind of an emotional scene for the show. Looking back on it, I mean, in the beginning, it was just like, "Wow, Scrooge is really depressed. This is odd." Not having known the comics, because at the time, I mean, the first episode of DuckTales, he's whistling as he walks down the street, talking about how horrible poor people are, which I mean, just horrible. But he's still happy, So this show was a huge departure from that, but more in line with Barks' story of Scrooge being unhappy until his family comes into his life. But we find out later, much, much later, that he's unhappy because that money represents the losses that he's had with his family. And then, of course, we get one of the greatest introductions of the series, I believe, and that's Launchpad driving Scrooge home. and he's like, hard day at the office, Mr. McD? And he's like, I like to think that the road is my office. He's like, I better write that down. Paisley does a great, she said it before, I can't remember what we were doing. We were in the car, and all of a sudden I hear, eyes on the road, McQuack.
I like how he's like constantly telling Scrooge, I'm a pilot.
Yeah.
And he just totally ignores him the whole episode.
Yeah, and this is the point where we first get a little bit of the plot device for the second part, where they're going to be going to the lost city of Atlantis. We start getting a little bit of that. And it's also where it kind of puts it in Scrooge's head that, he needs to do something. He needs to stop just sitting around. But when he pulls in, Donald's there trying to drop off the kids before Scrooge gets there, and then we have a great interaction between them. And again, having read so many of the comics and seeing their relationship from that versus this moment is really cool perspective, as they're just across from each other, kind of, so you still live in a boat? Yeah. So you're still a trillionaire? He's like, yep. And then, of course, the kids going just absolutely berserk in the background because they find out that he is their Uncle Scrooge.
Yeah.
Just great episode. We get the introduction of Beakley. I mean, it's very quick. I feel like we haven't had enough Beakley this season. Season 1 was the Agent 22, right? The case files, secret case files, Agent 22.
That was kind of the one that highlighted her the most.
Yeah, and she wasn't even in it that much. I mean, it was mostly flashbacks. But I'd like to have more Beakley. But yeah, we were introduced to her very quickly. But her dry wit and humor, I love it. Especially a little bit later after they've sent the boys off to play with marbles and lock them in a room. And she finds Scrooge trying to get into that old antique diving suit, and she's like, "This is all because some kids made fun of you, isn't it?" I think that was one of the first GIF requests that I made for you.
Yeah, I would really like to see a kind of a backstory of Mrs. Beakley and Webby.
Yes.
Because there's something going that happened there, and I think there should be an episode that shows their relationship and on how she came to taking care of her. Because there's got to be something there with them, because she's constantly training her to be this almost like a spy, but she doesn't really realize it because she thinks it's more fun than anything.
Well, we get, and I can't remember what episode it is. It's Scrooge's birthday. The McMystery at McDuck McManor. We find out that they're going off to some island where she can battle with other kids or something. And Beakley looks at her, gives her the stink eye, and she's like, "Oh, I'm just a vacation. There's not any need of these grenades," or whatever it was. But yeah, there's definitely something going on there. I think it'll be a big part of season 3. I really think season 3 is going to have both a Huey and Webby centric story going on at the same time. I mean, we saw this season the Louis centric story has kind of been spread around. I'm expecting the Doofus Drake episode to kind of dive back into that, obviously, with him and Goldie. But But yeah, I could see that happening in the next season. I'd love to say season 4, but I think it's anything could happen in the 4th season.
Yeah. I liked what you're kind of thinking behind the different seasons, and how like the first season was kind of centric on Dewey, and this one's kind of on Louie, and then maybe third season might be on Huey. Then I think it'd be great to have a 4th season on Webby.
Yeah, and maybe that's where we get more Beakley.
Mm-hmm.
But the kids get loose, and that's when they run into Webby, and another great introduction. Man, just the redesign of Webby. I don't know that I had any expectation of the character before we actually saw her, other than, we had that one teaser, and it just had her excited to meet the nephews and asking them questions, but we really didn't get to see much more of her. I really like her story about, we were talking about how Miss Beakley's been preparing her, but we really find out also in the opening, or in the premiere episode, that she sheltered her as well, because she's not letting her get out into the world. And it's not until the second episode that Beakley starts to cave on that. Webby has to sneak out, but it's very interesting. The way they redesign the character is very interesting, because I really love Webby in the new show.
Yeah, I totally agree. They kind of, or the original show was more of her being kind of like cutesy girl that always got herself into trouble because of it, and this is giving her that dimension of just being able to take care of herself, and giving her actually, I think a part in the show is where she has all this knowledge of all these ancient artifacts and history that she can contribute to the show, other than being a plot point of, oh no, I got captured, or oh, I fell down here and you have to save me. It's no longer the damsel in distress. It's actually a character that contributes to the story.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, Webby's more capable than the triplets. Yeah. She's much more prepared to deal with a disaster or a real threat or a challenge, but she struggles with just like social, just because she's not been around a lot of people. And so, that is a plot point of a future episode, past episode, but future in the context of our discussion, where, she's worried that she's going to come off as weird, and they tell her, just be the best you. That's not boring. If you try to be like everybody else, that's boring. So it's a great message, and really love the character. Love what they did with her, the wall. And we've been talking about Webby's wall for a long time, and we've even had episodes of the podcast where we were like, okay, this week we're just going to talk about Webby's wall. And for whatever reason, be it we got an interview or some news came out or whatever, we've not done it. And the reason why I still want to get back to the wall is there's definitely things on the wall that panned out. There were sky pirates, and we got sky pirates, and we had mention of Scrooge's ancestral home, and we got his ancestral home, and different things like that. But there's a ton of other things on the wall that I don't know that they've panned out. I don't know that we've seen them. And I know last season, at the end of season 1, Frank said there was stuff on the wall that he hasn't seen any discussion of online, which I find hard to believe. Well, not that maybe that he hasn't seen it.
Well, he says that, and then we have to point out, we blogged about that.
That's true. That has happened.
We just need to do a video of all the stuff on the wall. That way we can say, hey, look at this.
Maybe that's what we should do instead of doing a podcast episode of it. Because that way we can be showing the wall at the same time. Let's do that. Let's just do that sometime. With all of our free time. But yeah, there's a lot of great stuff on the wall. We get some important names thrown out there. Donald's family. Like Hortense and Quackmore. Those are big names in the Duck comics, but I don't know that I knew the names before then. I think I'd heard Hortense because of Scrooge, and she might have been mentioned in DuckTales before. But those names are dropped in this first episode, and we see pictures of them on her wall. So, and we find out that she's been studying the McDuck family, and she's telling the boys, "Listen, Donald was an adventurer," and they're like, "Whatever, our family's boring." And like you said, they in your recap, they end up in a wing of secrets where there's all this really cool stuff, and there is a lot of really cool stuff. And we see Bubba's skeleton, and we see the genie's lamp, which ends up being sold later in a yard sale, and all kinds of other callbacks that were fun. The Armstrong robot, but the kids get into some trouble, and that's when we get the another introduction to a character who's in the show for a long time, the Headless Man Horse. The introduction to Manny was so strange. It really didn't know what was happening at the time. As a matter of fact,
they really did a lot. I was going to say, it really did a lot with that character, more than I expected. I thought it was just going to be a one-off little character, but they've really recurred him with Gyro, and it's just funny that he's still a character that's around and is part of his little team.
But Scrooge shows up to save the day, and we get to see that he's still got it, except when he makes the mistake of hitting the gong of Pichu for the third time. And I think that's a great moment too, when he's like, what are y'all looking at? You got to hit it 3 times, and before you can even get that out, he's like, you've already hit it the first 2 times. So yeah, he unleashes a gold hunting dragon who of course goes after the money bin, and they have to pull together. Launchpad finally flies after we've been told he's a pilot over and over again. And of course, all this was after we found out that this was not a wing of secrets, it was just the garage. And Scrooge just had this stuff lying around the mansion, which promised us that we were going to get a ton of hilarious adventures in future episodes. But they do, in the end, save the day. They save Scrooge. And, man, it was just a great beginning. And Scrooge is excited to have his family back. But yeah, that was the first episode. We had so many great moments between then and now in the last 2 years, and we've got a lot of great things to look forward to coming up for the rest of this season and going into season 3, probably around October. That's what we're thinking is going to happen. Man, I think that's going to do it for this week, though. We'll be back next week with whatever news is going on, and we don't know yet, so stay tuned. That's a wrap. That's it. That's all. Until next time.
Stay blindfolded.
Good night. Good night.
Oh. DuckTalks is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Any sounds or audio clips played on this podcast are the property of their copyright holders. Don't leave that in this podcast.
Yeah.
Hey guys.
Hey guys. Now I don't even know what to say. I'm just saying good night.